Something major is unfolding right now between the United States and Iran, and the whole world is watching to see if decades of tension might actually be heading toward a turning point. Here is everything you need to know about where these talks stand, why they matter, and what could happen next. For years, the relationship between Washington and Tehran has been defined by sanctions, standoffs, and a nuclear program that has kept global security experts on edge. But according to multiple reports from international diplomats and news agencies, the two countries have been engaged in a new round of indirect negotiations aimed at finding a diplomatic path forward. These are not just quiet back-channel whispers. Officials on both sides have publicly acknowledged that talks are underway and that progress, while fragile, is being made. So how did we get here? To understand the current moment, you have to go back a few years. In 2018, the United States withdrew from the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal. That agreement had placed strict limits on Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for relief from international sanctions. After the U.S. pulled out, Iran gradually scaled back its own commitments to the deal and began enriching uranium at levels that alarmed Western governments and international monitors. Tensions spiked repeatedly over the following years, with sanctions tightening, regional flashpoints flaring up, and diplomacy repeatedly stalling. Now, in 2025, there appears to be a renewed push to find common ground. According to reports citing diplomatic sources, talks have been taking place through intermediary nations, with Oman playing a particularly notable role as a go-between. Oman has historically served as a quiet diplomatic channel between Tehran and Washington, and officials say that channel is active again. European nations are also reportedly involved in efforts to bring the two sides closer together. So what are the key sticking points? There are several, and they are significant. First and foremost is Iran's uranium enrichment. International inspectors have reported that Iran has been enriching uranium to levels that go well beyond what is needed for civilian energy purposes. The United States and its allies want Iran to roll back those levels substantially before any sanctions relief is granted. Iran, for its part, has insisted that its nuclear program is entirely peaceful and that it will not dismantle core parts of its nuclear infrastructure as a precondition for any agreement. Then there is the question of sanctions relief. Iran's economy has been under severe pressure from years of international sanctions, and Tehran has made clear that any deal must include meaningful and verifiable relief. The challenge on the American side is ensuring that any relief is tied to concrete, verifiable steps by Iran, rather than promises that could be walked back later.
Verification mechanisms, in other words, are a major part of what negotiators are trying to work out right now. Another layer of complexity involves regional security. The United States and its allies, including Israel and Gulf Arab states, have deep concerns not just about Iran's nuclear activities, but about its broader influence across the Middle East. Iran supports a number of armed groups across the region, and critics of any deal argue that sanctions relief could free up resources that end up funding those activities. Supporters of diplomacy counter that engagement is more effective than isolation at changing long-term behavior. According to analysts who follow these negotiations closely, the current round of talks is being described as more serious and more structured than previous attempts in recent years. Both sides reportedly understand that the window for a deal is not indefinitely open. Domestic political pressures, regional dynamics, and the pace of Iran's nuclear program all create a ticking clock that negotiators are acutely aware of. Now here is the part that really matters for everyday people wondering why this affects them. Iran's nuclear program sits at the center of one of the most sensitive geopolitical fault lines on the planet. A nuclear-armed Iran would fundamentally alter the security landscape of the Middle East and could trigger a regional arms race. On the flip side, a failed diplomatic process risks escalation that could affect global energy markets, since Iran sits on some of the world's largest oil and gas reserves. Oil prices, shipping routes through the Persian Gulf, and broader global economic stability all have a stake in how this plays out. For American families, the connection might feel abstract, but energy prices, military commitments abroad, and the general stability of global trade are all threads that tie back to what happens in this negotiation room. That is why governments in Europe, Asia, and across the Middle East are tracking every development closely. It is also worth noting what officials are not saying publicly. Neither side has announced a breakthrough. Both sides have signaled willingness to talk, but also red lines they say they will not cross. Independent analysts caution that these negotiations have collapsed before at stages that looked promising, and there is no guarantee this time will be different. According to reports, trust between the two governments remains extremely low, and each side is watching the other for any sign of bad faith. There are also voices on both sides pushing back against any deal at all. Hardliners in Iran have publicly criticized the negotiating team for engaging with Washington. In the United States, there is significant political debate about whether a new agreement can be structured in a way that is durable and enforceable. These internal pressures on both sides are as important to watch as the talks themselves.
International watchdog organizations, particularly the International Atomic Energy Agency, continue to monitor Iran's nuclear sites and issue periodic reports on the state of the program. Their assessments will play a critical role in shaping how any agreement is framed and whether the international community can verify compliance. Officials say transparency and inspection access are non-negotiable elements of any deal from the Western perspective. So, where does this all leave us right now? According to the most recent reporting, talks are ongoing. The tone is described as constructive by some parties, and there is cautious optimism in certain diplomatic circles. But cautious is the key word. There are major gaps still to bridge, significant domestic opposition on both sides, and a complex web of regional interests that any deal will have to navigate. What should you watch for in the coming weeks? Pay attention to any announcements from Oman or European diplomats, since those channels tend to signal whether progress is being made before either Washington or Tehran says anything officially. Watch for statements from the International Atomic Energy Agency, which will reflect whether Iran is taking any steps to limit its nuclear activities as a good-faith gesture. And keep an eye on oil markets, which tend to react quickly to any significant shift in the diplomatic temperature. This is one of those stories where the details matter enormously, and it is moving fast. We will keep tracking every development and breaking it down for you in plain language, so you always know exactly where things stand. If you want to stay ahead of this story and every other major headline shaping our world right now, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. We post every single day, and this is exactly the kind of story we will be following every step of the way.